Welcome to TradeTheNBI.com. This is John. This report is for the 4th of December. Well, this is, some people say it's prophetic in that, but it's just a matter of us paying attention to what the indicators tell us. We started with the extreme liquidity dry up here when we had the steel last time dip below. That created a little bit of euphoric buying because we were still well below cyan under red. And we knew that the prospect was, when we had the positive extreme, that we would get a fill back to that, which was right around this 3116 range. We also had the, 3117 on the 5K chart, and similar on the 50 as well. And we talked about this in the video yesterday about what that usually portends, at least a percent, well, between 1 and 3% decline in overall market. We got that and dipped below. We've not dipped below the red line, which means we will be coming back to revisit this low, which gives us a whole new marker. Let's go ahead and see what the low total was right there. It's 3069.50. So we'd already had the DOC spread. We were below the negative 13.5, and intraday bought it back up a little bit. We're now above the negative 13.5. That should give a little bit of a impetus buyback, but now the 3116 becomes a resistance from the top side. But this is why it's important to pay attention to these unique events that take place within the DOC readings, and why it's so important. We had everything that we look for from the crossover, the extreme move of the orange, and it's important to recognize because this orange is giving us the magnitude of the shift between relationships, particularly when we have crossovers. So when you have crossovers and large spikes, this literally began right here, but it followed through once we got above the plus 13.5 at this particular point, and then we shot, what is this orange reading, was 30, yeah, with the extreme move of the steel coming down below, and boom. So no shock, but probably for some people it was unexpected. But as I pointed out, in previous years, that markets do fall much faster than they rise, 66% faster. Now the NQ actually went pretty similar below the 76%, came back above, and that becomes also a threshold. In fact, we should look at that value for the daily as well on the it's 3086.50, so that becomes another key point at this particular stage here, right around 91 right now on the slight flatness. Break below that becomes another benchmark. So it becomes very easy for us to be able to see what those values are. From a euro standpoint, stabilizing as the little NATO, and there seems to be some rifts going on about trade and other things like that. Particularly with France and that, so that could put a little bit of pressure on it. But you had an opportunity here for midterm buyers and that to take over, and it didn't quite happen. So that adjustment going through there, if we get a rejection further, could spell a little bit more trouble for the euro, at least in the interim. So we'll see if it's able to follow through with that rising red DOC. Oil flat, no change in that at all. And gold took a slight bounce higher off of this P2 pivot building. Still, anything that happens with this likely to come back and revisit because the dip's below the red line. But that's going to be the one to watch because the fear factor moving into gold, and that would be the change in where price is. Well, this is the and currently where we're at, and you can see how flat this is. We have to scroll way back to get to the early part of the day. Alright, I already went and shrunk down the chart, and you can see that it fills it up only through part of the day, and that just shows you the amount of activity that was taking place volume-wise that was going through. So we had the rejection here with the crossover, orange partial move up there, which is, and this is a perfect indication of that orange situation. The fact that the orange didn't continue up meant that it was not quite significant enough to propel it. Even within that short signal, we came up back and forth with it a couple more times here, but you still had decaying red DOC with green below, and then it finally broke down as it attempted to pop right there, but you were still cyan leading steel. Green was already below, and you dipped below the red line, which meant the lows were going to be retested, and we talked about this as it was developing, going through, and then we just continued to cascade. And when you have that kind of damage, look at how far below the negative 13.5. So it wasn't until here that we first breached above the negative 13.5 on the DOC, giving any semblance of a possible move, immediate rejection of it, back to new lows. And that's when we started to build, and you can see the build in the red DOC coming off those lows. We were much closer to the negative 13.5, and that was giving it impetus to move forward from there. And look at that, it takes all the way to here to get it, even with this amount of shrinkage. So we ended up with a slow build as people were seeing value in it, and of course we talked about being the right time for new fund money to come in. And that's what gives it the hold. The question is, will there be additional selling into that new money coming in? And that is where we have to be focused in right now, because in the current read, we know what the thresholds are from that daily standpoint. I'll put it back up again, because that 76% line right there at 86.50, which we're just about 4 points off of right now, becomes a critical threshold, and that's where a lot of the accumulation took place. So if we start to break back below that level, then could see a new free fall that takes us all the way back down pretty darn quick. So market's going to fight back. It never usually wants to, make that run all at once. But again, this was an interesting liquidity event. At least from a daily standpoint, we're back above the negative 13 with the steel, but any move lower on that is going to really precipitate much deeper retrace in this. And as dramatic as that was, I mean, we're still over 3,000, so hardly anything to get worked up over. But you hear news and everything, and then people will call it a catalyst, but this was taking place even before a lot of the news came out. So I'm always suspect of that. There's always a reason for the narrative after the fact. You got to find something. They'll claim trade talks, whatever. It doesn't really make any difference to us. We just like to follow what the readings give us, and they were pretty clean. So no objections to that whatsoever. And glad we talked about it beforehand. And that really just great start to the month. I mean, you gotta love it, despite the fact that it was to the downside of that. We knew it was coming, and it's always great to be ahead of the curve. As always, though, anything unique and interesting I will certainly put up. As always, trade well.